Thanks for tuning in to this broadcast of the Resilient Advisor podcast. My name is Jay Coulter. Today is March 23rd, 2020. The markets and the economy are in absolute turmoil. Joining me today is Lenore Hawkins of Tematica Research. For anyone who's new to this broadcast, Lenore is trapped in northern Italy, and we're going to discuss the Fed's historic moves, all the chaos in the market. But just like the last couple of weeks, Lenore, catch us up on what's going on in Italy.
So we've now been, the entire country has been under a complete lockdown for a little over 2 weeks. The region I'm in has been under lockdown a little bit longer than that. I'm in the north, just north of Milan, just barely south of the border with Switzerland. I'm right in Lake Como. And the number of cases has continued to rise significantly, the number of deaths as well. So over the weekend, they locked it down even further to the point where now, although the government is doing a horrible job of communicating. So US, please learn from the mistakes here. Conti got on Facebook like Saturday night and said that everything's locked down to the extent that you can't even leave your house to go for a walk or go for a jog anymore. The only time you can leave the house is to get groceries or medicine. But it's unclear how much that's actually in effect. It's just chaos here. I mean, I went for a run on Saturday and the police stopped me. I mean, imagine that. You're out for a run and you're staying away from everyone and the police stop you and send you home. That's life here.
So you've seen that happen?
It happened to me.
It happened to you.
I mean, getting pulled over for running.
Yeah. And the people pulling you over, is it military? Is it police?
These are the police, but we also have the army patrolling the streets. So I managed to got the Carabinieri, so it's like the little local city police. And they were nice about it. They were apologetic, so they weren't mean, but it's gotten that bad. And it's, I think, really what's happening is more desperation because they just don't understand what's happening. And one of the theories, because people are asking what's going on in Italy, why one, does it have so many cases? And two, why is the mortality rate so high? Because it seems to be hitting here much harder. One of the theories, because people keep talking about that Italy's got a lot of older people, and that's true, but that doesn't really explain it all. What they've kind of come down to is there was this game, a soccer tournament that had people from Bergamo. One of the teams was Bergamo, and the other one was a team from Valencia, Spain. And it was such a big game that they actually held it in Milan because Bergamo is an epicenter in Italy. So you had this huge game with tons of people in Milan, and they think there were a number of sick people there, and then that became a ground zero. You have all these people crammed together for a soccer tournament, and that started it all because Bergamo has by far more than anyone else, but so does Milan, and the game was held in Milan, and Valencia is also a bit of a hotbed in Spain, so that's kind of making sense. They're also finding by randomly testing people all around Italy that they think that the death rate is actually, the mortality rate is very skewed because more people in Italy actually have the virus than they know, right? So our mortality rate isn't actually higher than anyone else. It's just there's so many more cases here. And I think we may likely see that in other countries as time goes by.
Getting back to getting pulled over for being out on a jog. So it seemed to me in the limited amount of news and video we could get out of Wuhan when they were in the depths of it all, those are the types of measures they have. You saw videos of folks being locked in their apartment buildings. You couldn't be anywhere on the street. Is it safe to say now that's really where you guys are in Italy now?
It is, but not with kind of the level of frightening violence. Like the police aren't dragging anyone out of their homes or forcibly shoving people into vans or anything like that. But at night, like you can't go out, period. So it's locked down at night. So if you want to go get groceries, you got to do it during the day. If I look outside right now in the middle of the day, there's nothing moving except for maybe some police cars. At night, they're patrolling and they have speakers going, basically saying, stay the hell home, don't come out. And so far, I mean, in my area, it's been working pretty well. People have been honoring that. I understand that in some of the bigger cities, they've been having more of a problem, which is why the lockdown occurred, because we just keep getting these case counts going up. How the hell are people getting sick when we've been in quarantine for 14 days? And that's basically the incubation period for the most part. That's the longest incubation period. But yeah, it's gotten pretty draconian. I mean, Amazon's announced that it's doing the same thing here as it's doing in the States, where they're not shipping anything other than the absolute essentials. When you order something, because I live in an office building, I have just the top 2 floors are just 2 apartments, and the rest of the building is an office space. If I order something, the delivery guy just calls from downstairs, and they literally just put it inside the entryway, and that's it. Like, there's no communication. Like, you don't come in contact with each other at all. So, what else are you gonna do? Because it's the strangest thing. People look at each other, and this is a super friendly country. Like, you greet and you kiss each other on the cheek. But people just look at each other and stay way back, because every person is potentially contagious. And they found actually some interesting data is coming out of Iceland, where they have gone about, because Iceland's a really small country, they are setting about testing every single person, which is similar to what they did in this tiny little town called Vo in Italy. And what they found in Iceland, and it's the same thing that they found in Vo, is that of all the people who've tested positive, half have absolutely no symptoms. So you have no idea that you have it, which is one of the explanations for why this thing becomes so incredibly contagious, because I could have it, be walking around feeling great. I think I'm fine, but I'm infecting people everywhere I go. And they have no idea. I have no idea.
Yeah.
So that's, and you kind of understand like some of the forced quarantine, because here I'm, frustrated and angry because I'm like, I'm not sick. When I go out for a run, I stay the hell away from everyone. And I'm thinking, I'm fine because I'm not sick, but maybe I have it. Maybe I'm a carrier. Maybe I'm making people sick when I walk by them.
Mm-hmm. So as you look at this through a macro economist lens, you see what happened in China. You saw it roll through Italy. We're starting to see Germany, France, Spain have some problems, or France and Spain, and then England seems to be a disaster in the making. Is it all unfolding the same way it did in Italy through your lens?
Yes, very much. At first, everyone thinks it's ridiculous. This is just the flu. Why? And people just, it's not that serious. And I think it's some of it. I mean, at this point, I'm a little frustrated with America, because come on, people. Like, it was one thing when it was in China, and we can all say, well, that's a very different world, and they have very different rules, and we're not entirely sure of the truth of all the information coming out of it, right? So it's one thing you can say that, you can tell yourself that, but it's another thing entirely, Americans, when you're seeing Italy and Spain and France, and you're seeing what's going on there, and you're still all going to the damn beach. Don't do it. I know. It just amazes me. It's very much the same thing, like particularly when you look at what's happening in New York, right? Because that's what we're seeing is those areas that are major economic hubs, that are also major international business travel destinations. That's where it's exploding. It's exploding in Milan, in New York, in London is going to be a disaster. It's exploding there. You're seeing it in Madrid, in Barcelona. Germany is it's getting very, very bad there. And people just don't take it seriously, because we've never experienced this. You can't believe it's true. Mm-hmm. So people don't, they don't change their habits, but it's amazing how fast the habits do change, where, I mean, here now it's the new normal. People are terrified to be near each other. You stand very far apart from each other. If you're going to the grocery store, and when you show up there, you're going to be waiting in a line, and you're going to be standing like 10 feet away from one another.
Yep. And
new
normal. That's coming here to the United States.
It is. It is. And I think with the US, I'm hoping New York's going to have a real tough time, because it's very dense population. And you also have when you have a lot of public transportation, that's terrible, right? You get one person on the subway, and how quickly that can get passed around. I think good parts of the US are going to have maybe a little bit better time of it, because just the way people get around is not conducive to this thing spreading as much. You have much lower population densities, so hopefully that will help. But
listen, driving around, I live in the suburbs of Atlanta, and some people are taking it seriously, but driving around, it just does not seem like enough people are taking it serious at this stage, which is crazy to me. And maybe you and I pay a little closer attention to the news on a global scale, so we had a little more of a heads up. But look at this website I came across this weekend that I wanted to share with viewers. Yeah. And this breaks down each state. And for folks that are listening and not watching the video, it's covidactnow.org. And this is modeling for each state and what will happen based upon the reaction time. So I'll just pull up Georgia right now, and it's showing, the point of no return for intervention to prevent hospital overload is tomorrow. Yeah. And then it models out the cases. If we take no action, how many deaths? There's 3 months of social distancing and 3 months of shelter in place. Now, for those of you that can't see the screen, if we have 3 months of shelter in place, 6,000 deaths are estimated. 3 months of social distancing, 158,000. And if we do nothing, 211. This is just the state of Georgia. Which is crazy.
And that's actually not even taking into account, because when they're doing these modeling, that is just the number of deaths from COVID. And this is the problem that we're facing here in Italy, is when you overload the medical system, it's not available for anyone. So if you're pregnant and you need to go to the hospital, what are you going to do? If you break your leg and you need to go to the hospital, what are you going to do? I mean, everything. And that's where some people who are talking about, and I understand people are very frustrated and they're saying, just let it go through the system. And yes, people are going to die, but they're thinking overall, like, look at the fatality rate. Oh, well, if it's 3-4%, I mean, it's still really high, but not everyone's going to get it. So if it's 3% and say 50% of the population get it, well, then you're only talking about 1.5% of the population is going to die from this. It's bad, but it's not horrible. Except for that's not the right math. It's not the fatality rate. The problem is the hospitalization rate. And as you were showing there, the hospitalization rate is somewhere between 10 to 20%, more like the 15 to 20%. And that very quickly overwhelms the hospital. And now there's no health care for anyone. So now everything becomes life-threatening. What about that guy who has a stroke or have a heart attack or something as simple as an extreme allergy reaction and you need to get to the hospital really fast so that they can give you something for it? Well, you're going to die. Right? And then think about the social chaos of that people who, and you're going to have people who have this who can't get treated and they're young. And they can't get treated. Or it's your grandma and they decide, well, they're not going to treat grandma because, well, she's over 70 and they're going to treat this other guy who's like 35. Well, you can kind of understand that, but that's your grandma. And the complete unraveling of the social fabric. And that's why they're trying so desperately to slow this, because it isn't as simple as saying, let's see what percent die, because that percent that dies, that mortality rate is based on having adequate hospital. So the 3% mortality is based on that of everyone who gets it, those who need hospitalization have that available. The mortality rate goes up dramatically, and it's actually one of the reasons in Italy as well that the mortality rate has gone up is because you don't have adequate hospital care. And if it's 15 to 20% need hospital care, that's not like you're going to the hospital because it's a freaking spa. You're going to the hospital because you're in a very, very bad state. Maybe not immediately ICU, but you go into the hospital. Some of them need to get ICU. Now imagine if you don't have any hospital care at all. Now what? Now what's the mortality rate going to do? It's going to go up an awful lot.
Well, here in Georgia, a 12-year-old is on a ventilator. And I still have peer group telling me that, we don't need to worry about this. It's just affecting the older people. It's a shame. Hopefully folks pay attention. And Lenore, I cannot wait to have you on this show someday. And we don't start by talking about coronavirus.
On a note with that too, by the way, the median age in Ireland, because Ireland, unlike Italy, Ireland skews younger, right? The population is much younger. The median age of people who've contracted it is 44.
There you
44.
Go.
This is not something that just gets the old people. Now, granted, you're more likely to survive it, but then again, you're more likely to survive it with that 20% that need hospital care.
Hey, you still don't want to go to the hospital. Stay home.
Yeah.
Right, let's pivot. It has been a heck of a day, heck of a week. The Fed's historic moves were almost too large to wrap your head around. QE infinity is the term I keep hearing. Lenore, break it down for us.
So we have been seeing the market do things that are wholly unprecedented in all of history. The degree of volatility, the moves. We were talking earlier about the ETF LQD, which is the investment grade corporate bond ETF. In 9 days last week, it lost 10 years of appreciation. 10 years. I mean, that
one chart says it all.
10 years. I mean, you can't prepare for this. And we're seeing this massive race for liquidity. So this is where it gets really ugly and really complicated. So everybody's panicking, right? So the more people panic, they want to get into cash, right? So you start selling everything. So now bonds are going down, gold's going down, share equities going down, and everybody's trying to get into the dollar, except, what is the one asset in the entire world that has the biggest short on it? The US dollar, because of all that US dollar denominated debt. So if you have a debt, right? Because when you think about it, when you short something, well, you're letting somebody else go long, you don't actually have it, right? Well, the amount of dollar denominated debt around the world is roughly about 12 trillion, or about 60% of US GDP. So there's a 12 trillion short on the US dollar, and the US dollar just keeps going up and going up. And it's the risk here is pretty massive. And that's one of the reasons last week that the Fed opened up all these swap lines with central banks all over the world to keep pumping dollars into them as they need them, because that's the big fear, is having this dollar really spike. Now we've gone to this QE infinity where the Fed says, well, we're just going to not stop buying. And I mean, there's no playbook here, so I don't have a crystal ball. So there's, all I can do is say the probabilities. But if the Fed throws out where it is going to do literally everything, it will just infinitely print money to try and help asset prices find a floor. And in response, the market went and continues to drop. There's no floor. There's no floor possible. And if there's no floor possible, I suspect that we're looking at possibly closing all the markets. And I think that may not be such a bad idea. Now, I realize that there's a lot of complexity around that, but right now, there is no such thing as fundamentals. All you have is everyone racing for the doors because we have no idea what we're dealing with. This isn't an economic thing. This is something where the global economy, at this point, you got to think, what's worst case scenario? Shut down for a year. Who knows? We have no idea what the magnitude of this. Is it going to be weeks? Is it going to be months? Is it going to be years? We don't know. So
Lenore, let's play this out. So they closed the market for a week after 9/11, couple days after Hurricane Sandy. Let's just say it's 2 weeks, and let's say they do it tomorrow. What happens over the next 2 weeks when investors want their money? What happens to the people who are going to need to tap their 401k or IRA to start living? Unpack that for us.
That is going to be where they have to step in. So I think there need to be a couple prongs here. So right now what the Fed's trying to do is help create a floor. Didn't work, but they're trying to create a floor for asset prices that trade on the markets, right? For bonds, for equities. That was the intent there. It's not working. Okay, and then if these just keep spiraling down, the amount of wealth that's just destroyed is something basically we can't ever recover from it. So that's kind of a Wall Street bailout, with the idea that if you keep Wall Street going, that will help Main Street. And I actually think this is not the right way to go. You do need to pay attention to Wall Street, but it can't just be Wall Street. Main Street needs, and Main Street is really, that's the engine of the economy. It's not the financial economy gets all the headlines, but the real economy is what needs the desperate saving here. So I think with that, they need to take a little bit of look of what Italy's been doing. And we can kind of break this down where you stop mortgage payments, you stop rent payments, stop utility payments.
Okay,
because
so hang
what
on,
we need,
hang on.
yeah.
Let's unpack that, because they were actually
Okay.
talking about this on CNBC
Yeah.
this morning. So if we stop mortgage payments and rent payments, the commercial real estate market under massive duress and brings down the banks with them. It creates this waterfall, right?
But the thing is, you got to stop everything. So we got to look at this as, because this is, the patient needs to be put into a coma, right? We got to stop everything. And I mean, everything. Because if you're going to stop the economy, if businesses can't open, if they can't operate, you can't say, because what they're doing right now with the shutdown, it's what's happening in Italy and they're trying to address it. But when you shut down the economy this way, all that you're doing is you're stopping the ability to generate revenue for most of the economy. Now, granted, like utilities can still generate revenue, right? Amazon's still functioning. You've got banks that can still charge the mortgage, but the person isn't out earning money so that they can pay it. All we've done basically is stop the revenue side. We need to stop the expense side too. So when I say like we stop the mortgage and the rent payments and all that, well then I'm not paying my mortgage, but the bank has bonds, and the bank needs to be able to pay those bonds because grandma and grandpa own bonds and they are living off the income. Well, that's where the Federal Reserve can go and give that money to the banks. And there's all kinds of accounting tricks that we can use to do this, but this is what I'm thinking we really need to do. You stop the burn so that businesses and individuals, you're really reducing their burn rate so that a business isn't going, I can't do it. I'm out. I quit. I'm shutting my doors, because when that happens, they don't come back and all those jobs are gone. You need to take that pressure off and say, okay, we're putting it all on hold. You don't need to worry about the electricity bill. You don't need to worry about your rent for your retail shop. It's all just stopped. You're not making income, but you're not burning cash on the outside. So the banks, then they need to be protected from that. And the Fed can very easily do that. And then on the household side, right, all of us, well, you're not getting income and you need to keep your food and all that. Well, then we can just look at giving those payments. And that's one of the things that they're looking at, is giving those payments to individual households. There's a variety of ways that we can look at this, but it needs to be where everything just stops, because companies cannot be forced to be bleeding out one side while you're stopping them from having the ability to earn income on the other.
Let's pivot to the airlines.
Yeah.
So why not just put them in bankruptcy, but let them work themselves out of that through this crisis?
What good does it do? Yeah, what good does it do to put them into bankruptcy? So, I mean, I'm a big fan of bankruptcy and failure, but because that's a good part of the free markets. But that's not what's happening right now. It's not poorly managed business that's causing the problem. And we desperately need those airlines because that is part of the plumbing of the global economy. So you don't want to remove a major pipe that's involved with helping the economy flow because of this crisis. They need to be kept going. I mean, the planes aren't flying, but we need to not have them die.
So it's my limited understanding of bankruptcy and airlines is that they can be in bankruptcy and still have their assets there. And under your scenario where we just stop doing things for a while, that's fine. Now, the equity holders get wiped out, but taxpayers are not bailing them out for the equity holders. But the airlines are still there. That plumbing is still there for when the economy goes and restarts. What do you think?
That ship has sailed, I think. I mean, we came into this. The problem is there's no good answers out of this. And we've come into this. I mean, you and I had talked about this before all hell broke loose and the world turned upside down. That we came into this in a very bad situation. We have a Federal Reserve that has, since Alan Greenspan, been doing everything it can to kind of override the natural business cycle. Apparently they decided they wanted to get rid of having any recession. Yeah. Get rid of recessions. We're not going to have that. It's just always going to be up all the time. Well, when you do that, the natural outcome of that has been that businesses make poor decisions because they're not risking a downturn, right? Like if you never have to worry about winter coming, you're not so worried about properly farming and putting enough away for when it's cold and you can't get the food. Well, if you're never going to have winter, right, you don't ever prepare. So businesses have been incentivized to not do that. And in fact, those businesses that were more responsible, didn't take the outside risks, they got punished in the period leading up to the great financial crisis, right? Because their peers took more risks and they got better returns on their shareholders, right? The CEOs themselves made more money, the shareholders made more money. And then when the great financial crisis came, these responsible banks got treated just like everyone else. So lesson learned. Don't be smart, take a lot of risks and take huge risks. So here we are, where as we headed into this, we have the most amount of corporate debt, the highest level of corporate debt relative to GDP that we've ever had in history. And we have all these share buybacks, right, where the only net purchaser of shares for years has been companies themselves. So that's just kind of a Ponzi scheme, right? That's a little game. There's no one else is buying, right? So they're just buying their own because, I got my stock options. So again,
yes.
Yeah, so we created this very vulnerable economy. And we just did it one more time with having the economy grow for the longest period we've ever seen without a recession. And son of a gun, you have a super, super vulnerable economy, right? Because, like to be healthy, to be strong, you need stress, right? You need to get hit. And we've been protecting the stock market and we're protecting businesses from getting hit. So son of a gun, we're in a pretty vulnerable state. So now we got to deal with that reality on top of something that the world has never seen. I mean, we've never faced something of this magnitude. So I feel like when we're talking about, shareholder or taxpayer bailouts, but it's a circle, because if we don't do it, then there's no job. So then you're not bailing it out because you don't have any money.
Well, didn't Italy nationalize Air Italia?
Yeah, Alitalia. It does that all the time, though. Italy's a very bad example for that. Italy is probably the worst, next to Greece. It's probably one of the worst run countries in Europe. Secretly in Italy, we're all kind of hoping that Germany takes over because it's a freaking disaster here. Really, if you look at Italy, since it joined the EU, so you look at per capita GDP in Italy from 2000, when the unified currency began. From 2000 to today, the per capita GDP has dropped. Last time I looked, it was dropped over 5%. Greece had only dropped 2%. It's the worst of all of them. Meanwhile, Germany went up 28%. In the same time, the US went up 25%. It needs new management.
Well, speaking of new management, let's end on this one. What are your thoughts about Congress, their inability to get something through? And let's not pile on. What do you think they should get through to provide some relief to the U.S.?
I think, they need to stop. It's two things. I think one, households have got to get some money, right? Because if you're stopping everyone and saying you can't go to work, you have to give them something to live on, right? Otherwise, it's all going to fall apart, and we have just total chaos and riots in the streets, right? You cannot stop people from earning an income and not protect them. But I think they also really need to look at the small businesses, and that my idea with the stopping the loans, starting the rent payments, all that, it's really focused not only just on the families, but really on small businesses, because that is where the majority of it comes from in the US. That's where new jobs start, is with those small businesses. And those guys, they don't have the bandwidth to live through this, right? If you're running a small retail shop, you don't have the ability to be shut down for 3 or 4 months and recover. And when they all go out of business, then you have all these assets, right? All their inventory and all that just gets liquidated, and you have huge deflationary pressures. So forget the inflation, you have huge deflationary pressures, because you'll have all of these assets that have been built, manufacturing plants and all the inventories, cars on a dealer's car lot, right? If they're going bankrupt, then they're just selling it for whatever they can get. And that is a massive deflationary pressure, which is the last thing we need.
Yeah. Lenore, I know that you are in the middle of all the chaos. I know your life is turned upside down, but gosh, each of the last 3 weeks you've come on to share your experience of what's happening in Italy and your thoughts on what's going on around the world. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.